The things that Bush is promulgating are utopian. Trust me, we're good people. We know it all. We're infallible. It belongs to the domain of Robespierre. If you will not accept virtue, I will cram it down your throat. That's the mentality of this crowd. Now, when it comes to this war power authority, it's not just Bush who makes these claims of unilateral power in the president to send our men and women off to die for whatever he thinks is useful, whether it's a surge, the 80th charge of the Light Brigade with the same result or otherwise. It's been accepted by, I think, the people in the media. And let me recall, a recent incident in the presidential campaign that I think substantiates my observation. You may recall that Hillary Clinton was interviewed on TV and she was told, well, if I'm president and Iran attacks Israel, I attack Iran. My first thought was, how can you attack? You don't have any congressional things. You can do that on your own? No. And where was the commentary? It wasn't, well, has she made herself queen? Is she Queen Elizabeth? She's watching too many movies? But it was just accepted. Well, of course she could do that. And anybody else could as well. Did McCain or Obama try to take her to task? No, because they also think the same way. And the American people have come to think the same way. And the media has come to think the same way. And that's the danger. We just shrug our shoulders. These are truly revolutionary ideas in the sense of revolutionizing what the United States of America is about. Now, let's take a lesson from our own founding fathers about how to react to these claims. You may recall in 1765, the Parliament enacted the Stamp Act, which created a tax on everything in writing, anything that was printed in the colonies, ranging from cards to legal papers or otherwise. And there was a big protest about the stamp tax. No taxation without representation. Well, Parliament repealed the stamp tax in 1767, but simultaneously they passed the Declaratory Act, whose substance was, we repealed that stamp tax, but we can still regulate you in whatever matters we wish, and you have no right of representation. Now, the Founding Fathers didn't say, hey, no corpses, who cares? They were alarmed. Jefferson said this is a blueprint for absolute tyranny and despotism. It accelerated the movement towards 1776. They understood what theories were, and they said, no, our liberties aren't at the sufferance of you. The same words that we see enshrined in the Declaration of Independence. Our liberties aren't at the sufferance of any government. They're unalienable. Now, I think that if we went after this presentation this evening and dinner and saw President Bush make a special primetime appearance on television, announced, ladies and gentlemen, I have just been made emperor. I have coronated myself like Napoleon. But don't worry, trust me, I'll protect your liberties. I'm only going to use these powers as emperor to go after Al-Qaeda. And by the way, you'll notice that since I announced my coronation, there has not been a terrorist attack. That shows you we need to keep me as emperor, because otherwise there'll be a terrorist attack. Post hoc, ergo propter hoc. How would the United States respond? Would the Congress have the gall to say, hey, we need to impeach this fellow? He's claimed he's an emperor. Or Nancy Pelosi said, don't have the votes, impeachment's still off the table. We don't want to be unmannerly here. Don't create controversy. After all, maybe I'd like to be an empress someday. And I have my doubts whether this country at this time would stand up and say, it's the end of your tenure, Mr. President. We're voting you out of office. And the American people would write in millions of emails, protests. This guy's got to go. And the reason why that's dismaying, somebody like me, I came to Washington 41 years ago. It was the middle of Watergate. I worked in the Justice Department at that time. Indeed, one of my first tasks was to define what was an impeachable offense for a president. Hadn't been examined since Andrew Johnson in 1868, going up to something like a Dickensian hovel in the Library of Congress in 100-degree weather and looking at these old parchments. But I was there at the time of the Saturday Night Massacre. I was over looking at the Department of Justice balcony in the Great Hall when Elliot Richardson said, "I quit." And William Ruckelshaus said, "I quit." And there were 450,000 telegrams into the White House. And then the president backed down and we had Leon Jaworski. And when the president announced de facto, if I say I can burglarize Daniel Ellsberg, psychiatrist, it's legal, the people said, no, it's not. And they held hearings, and ultimately we forced him from power. My proudest moment of American was seeing Richard Nixon leave the White House. I said, this is our finest hour. We don't accept abuses of power like this. This is the United States, we the people. It's not that we're gleeful and want retribution, but this is what it means to be self-governing people. That gives us that pride and dignity. We can make errors, but by God, we are not going to be vassals. We'll decide them ourselves. Where is this atmosphere today? Nothing. And the things that Bush has done are more egregious than Nixon, even though Nixon set a pretty high benchmark. Let me give perhaps one that to me is the starkest example, the president's claim of executive privilege. Remember how Watergate began to unravel for the president? He had a White House counsel named John Dean, former White House counsel, who, before Congress, was recounting chapter and verse of what? Conversations in the Oval Office with the president. Remember, the president could raise $25,000 to pay off the burglars, but that would be wrong. And no one suggested, "Oh, John Dean, you can't testify. You're talking about Oval Office conversations. This is sacred communications. Otherwise, if he talks, presidents will never be able to plot crimes again." How bad that would be, right? So Dean testified fully that the president himself never claimed authority to shut him up. And we all know what ultimately happened, the tapes and whatever. Now, let's fast forward to today. We have subpoenas out to Harriet Miers, former White House counsel like John Dean, Joshua Bolten, he's White House chief of staff, Karl Rove, former political advisor. Testimony is sought in some White House documents. They relate to the firings of the United States attorneys and trying to cast sunshine on what was the White House involvement. May or may not involve criminality in the sense that some of the answers might tend to prove that Alberto Gonzales, that hapless soul, perhaps strayed from the truth when he testified. Although I must admit, someone with that strength of amnesia, you'd probably have a pretty good defense that he really never knew what he was saying, so the intent to lie would be hard to establish. But putting that aside, to the serious part, this is what the president has said. He's ordered Harriet Miers not to show up. Now, that's quite an extraordinary power. The president's saying as king, he can tell a citizen not to show up in response to a congressional subpoena. And what was the authority for that? Well, I'm king. I told her not to show up. An answer, not even to show up and say, I can't talk about this, it concerns executive branch communications. Just, I don't want to be there. The hell with you. The same with Josh Bolten, Karl Rove. What is this?